Welcome to Mining the Mysteries, a catechetical podcast that explores the depths of our Orthodox and Catholic faith in the English tradition. I'm Matthew Stewart, Digital Media Director for the Anglican Province of America, along with your hosts Father Wade Miller and Father Randall Russell from St. Philip's Anglican Church in Blacksburg, Virginia. We're glad to have you with us as we dig deeper into the faith that was once for all delivered to the saints.
Welcome back, folks. This week we have a special episode and a special guest with Father Sean McDermott from All Saints Church in Charlottesville, Virginia. We are going to be discussing the subject of forming and shaping young children in the church. Father Miller, go ahead and introduce us to Father Sean.
Well, it's great to have Father Sean with us. We've wanted to do this for a while, and so this is a real treat. And just a little bit of background about Father Sean. Father Sean was raised in Southwest Virginia, also known as God's country.
Amen.
And so he is lifelong and will continue to live in the Commonwealth. And he received a Bachelor of Arts degree in ancient Greek from Hillsdale College. And then he went on to teach Latin and Greek at the middle and high school levels for 8 years. And during that time, he received his Master of Arts in Religion from Trinity Anglican Seminary in 2019. And then he was also hired as a curate at All Saints in Charlottesville, worked with Father Glenn Spencer. And then he became the rector not too long ago in 2024. And so now he is the rector of All Saints. Since 2019, he has helped run Earth and Altar, and we will put that in the show notes. That is a great resource, so please check that out. He's also worked as a website and publisher and seeks to support laymen in their parishes with Earth and Altar, giving solid Anglo-Catholic resources. He and his wife, Julie, have 5 children. And when he's not at church reading or talking theology, you can find him riding his bike around the Charlottesville area. And one other thing that we will talk about later is he is now the director of our camp. And what is the name of that, by the way?
Yeah, it's now going to be called St. Bede's Summer Camp.
St. Bede's Summer Camp. And so if you want more information about that, we'll try to provide a link, and so you can find out more about that as well.
Registration is now open on the APA website.
Yeah, so there we go.
I'll include a link in the show notes.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. So it is great to have you, Father Sean. Thank you for coming on and tackling this topic. And I know All Saints, even more so than here, but we've been getting a lot of young families, a lot of babies being born, a lot of babies yet to be born. And so this is a big question. And so as we talk about, how do we help form and shape children to become sons and daughters of the church and have a real heart for the church or sacraments. And so thank you again for being here. So let's jump right into this. And as we talk about this, maybe talk about your experience at All Saints, because I know, like St. Philip's, the vast majority, all the people now that come here are not former Episcopalians. Most of them are evangelicals or come from that background. So kind of guide us through what that's like and that dynamic.
That's a great question. First off, thanks for having me here. This is great. I'm so glad that we're doing more things like this at the diocesan level and what you guys are doing. So it's really a pleasure of mine to be on this as well. Raising up the youth and, this question of how do we get kids excited about church, but then also keep them in church, and then maybe that crazy possibility of them staying in church after they go to the Wild West of college. These are things like I think about a lot. It started when I was a teacher for quite a while at a Christian non-denominational school, but this was a conversation that we had there quite a bit too. How do you have a Christian school? And now that I've come to All Saints, a lot of those actually kind of the same insights carry over, and the same ways that we look at children and youth really carry over into the church as well. And I don't think it's rocket science. Kids are really scary to most adults. And then when you have your own kids, I think you can kind of enter back into the reality of childhood and you can see that. But still, talking to your own kids is tough. Being open with your own kids is tough. And so I think adults have an insecurity around kids. So my theory is that most adults are really actually like middle school students, but we're able to mask our insecurities better. And middle school students can't. And so you figure out very quickly how they feel and what's going on inside of them. With adults, that's a little bit harder. But still, we get scared when we get into situations where we don't know someone, we don't know how they're going to act. We get nervous around children who push back and ask really good questions, and when we don't really know all the answers or how to answer them, and especially when they're not our own kids. And so having kids around at the church, having other kids over to your own home is not easy. It's not this kind of easy thing, but it's also not hard to learn what to do about it. And I think there it's pretty simple, is get into the mind of the child, is to actually think about what was your experience as a middle school student. And when you ask that question to most people, their faces do not light up in happiness. They do not say, I had the most amazing middle school experience. No, it was really difficult. It was hard. You felt lost. You felt it was hard to make friends. You felt embarrassed, things like that. And so when you put yourself into the shoes of a middle school student, you then can start learning how to act towards them. And I think what it really just requires is an openness and a calm, and to ask questions and get to know the kids. So I'm saying all that just to say, to preface all this, that I know we think maybe at first that being around kids is easy, but it's not. And it's not easy because it hits at insecurities or questions that we might still have as adults that we're not really sure about. And as we go through this, I'm hoping that the adults who are listening might learn a little bit just of how to interact with kids, how do we go about it, and why that's really important. So does that set the stage a little bit?
It does. I think I never really thought about that, but it's true. I think we're all seeking to mask insecurities, and with a middle school child, using that understanding, it is true that sometimes, well, not sometimes, all the time, it can be a challenge relating, but part of that is because we ourselves have those same kind of insecurities. And yeah,
it's not just about them. It's really about us. And this is where then when we move specifically to the question of churches, this is where we really need to focus, because how we treat children in the church shows what we believe about the human person in general. It's kind of like that Latin phrase that we probably use all the time or too much, the lex orandi, lex credendi. The law of praying is the law of believing, meaning how you pray is what you believe. It's the sign of your belief. So when you walk into a church and there's a stage with fog machines and a big band up on stage, you know that they're probably not Anglo-Catholic, right? But if you walk into a church and there's an altar and then there's incense instead of a fog machine, and there's an organ instead of a band, and then there's a crucifix on top of the altar, I actually understand a lot about their theology just from seeing the architecture and the physical church, right? So we all notice that, and we probably are all in our churches because of that, right? Like we walked in and thought, the theology is here in the liturgy, and it's beautiful. Well, apply that to how a church treats children and what it means about anthropology, basically. So if you go to a church, and I'm bringing this up because I had this conversation with this new family that just started coming to All Saints, and they grew up Episcopalian, then they found Jesus in the Baptist tradition and started reading their Bibles for the first time, which is a really wonderful thing to do, and just fell in love with Jesus. Then they had a few kids, And they started just feeling strange that they couldn't keep their kids in the church service. They were encouraged, sometimes not with words, but with awkward looks, that their kids should go to children's church, that the kids can't really handle the real church. That is the reason why then the husband started looking into, wow, this is kind of weird. Maybe I should look up infant baptism. Maybe should I look up, what the Episcopal Church used to do. And then he started looking up Anglican churches and then came to us. And it was all started about how the church treated children. So he then made a connection. It took a while, but then he made a connection that the churches that encourage infant baptism, for the most part, keep the children in the services later on. From the beginning, they don't just have a totally separate children's church, right?
Mm-hmm.
The churches that do not encourage infant baptism, but like a believer's baptism or something like that, they don't keep the children in the church. And I think that this actually has to do with a much deeper theological point of anthropology, of do we believe that a human person, no matter what age, is a full human person?
Yeah.
So a child can be a child of God as an infant and a member of Christ's church, not in a insignificant way, but as a full member of the church. And we in the West, we still separate baptism and confirmation. In the East, they go even another step, right? They baptize and confirm at right at then. And they do give communion as well to the infant, right? The logic there is very consistent. We've separated confirmation from baptism to use confirmation in a fuller way, I think. I like what we do. But the important part is that we all accept that when a baby is baptized as an infant, as a tiny baby, they are full members in the life of the church. And so because of that, the service itself is open to kids. We encourage it. One of the phrases we use here is that we're much more rather hear the cries of a baby than the groans of a boomer, right? Sitting in the pews. We want the noise in our pews because it shows a lively faith and a care for not just adults, not just those persons who are intellectually capable. No, we actually believe the sacraments are deeper than that, and that they answer the full human, no matter what age, no matter what your intellectual ability is. We believe that Christ is for them. And that idea of looking at children in that fullness of the person, I think, shows first in how you treat children in the church. Do you welcome them in? Things like that.
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, and, in terms of the priesthood, our vocation, our calling is from cradle to grave, right? And you touched on it, you talked about it a little bit, but in terms of, and I love what you said about, the observation about infant baptism, that those that are baptized, there's a bigger emphasis to keep them in the Mass, not to have a separate service or church service or something like that, or children's church or whatever it is. But in terms of confirmation, talking about that a little bit, I think, one of the things within the Catholic tradition, and I saw this especially when I was in New York City, was the idea that, your kids, they make their first communion, they're confirmed, and then it's almost like a graduation from church. How do we combat that? How do we deal with that? And I know you've already talked about this in terms of including them, but any other thoughts on that?
Oh, I have so many thoughts on this one, because this one just makes me it makes me pretty upset of how the Roman Church has switched the traditional order of confirmation and First Communion, right?
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, that only happened at Vatican II. That's only been in, the last 80 years, right? This is not a new thing, or this is a very new thing. The problem with that is that confirmation then becomes much more like what believer's baptism is at a Baptist church, which is the person making a statement about Jesus Christ, right? And that's not what we really believe the sacraments are. The sacraments are actually God's gift to us. And this is why I think teaching on confirmation is so important. That confirmation, if you look at the liturgy, it is the pure gift of God of the 7 gifts of the Holy Spirit. And that comes from this really cool prophecy in Isaiah 11 that's talking about the Son of Man. And the Son of Man will have these 7 gifts. And so confirmation is then our strengthening, our being strengthened, confirmo in Latin just means to strengthen, our being strengthened by these gifts, which are the characteristics of Christ himself, the Son of Man. So it's us growing in the likeness, the image and likeness of Christ. And so the bishop comes and lays his hand on you, and we could talk about, oh, there's so many good stuff there in that imagery. He lays his hands on you, and now you are being given the gifts that Jesus Christ has. You didn't do anything to deserve that. It is the pure gift of God that's given to you. Now, our prayer book, the rubrics, say that in order to be confirmed, you need to know the Lord's Prayer, the Apostles' Creed, and the 10 Commandments. So think about that for a second. When do kids learn those? Do they need to be 13 or 16 or 18 graduating from high school? No, they don't. They need to know what they are, and they need to know what they mean. But we encourage kids to be confirmed and then have First Communion after confirmation as young as 6. That's really young. But 7, 8, 9, when the kid is ready and can have those conversations. And when the parents tell me that, then I meet with the kids, usually after church, for a number of weeks. And it's less about making sure they know all the details of the instructions, like in, the instructions of the faith from the prayer book, and make sure they can recite to me all the 10 Commandments. No, it's more about having them understand, do you know what is happening in the confirmation service? Do you see how cool this is? That you now are being given the armor of God to go fight as his soldier for him? And then from there, we move into, okay, and then how do you live that life? Why is this important? And the difference there is that instead of talking down to the kids of like, here's what you need to know, and I'm going to grade your assignments next week. Instead, it's the bringing the kids into this wonderful, rich tradition that we have. And I think there's this important thing that we need to remember, that there is, yes, our attitude towards kids that matters, right? We need to really view them as full persons. But then we need to have a childlike openness that we receive from the children. So it's not just me listening to them and always leading the conversation. It's actually listening to the children and teaching them what is going on, and then listening to what that means to them. And see, what I'm doing then is I'm reminding myself that I need to have the openness that a child has. I need to listen as a child has to listen to me. I need to listen to them. And so there's a lot. This is just so important. It's hard to place enough emphasis on this. We need to be the ones who are listening to children and making sure that the child himself or herself feels heard. And I'll tell you, that's really difficult because a child is not going to give you that opportunity right up front. They know that they've been turned down or by other adults. They know that most adults don't really listen to them. And so for you to gain their trust, it takes time to get down on their level and actually listen. And by their level, I actually usually mean actually being eye to eye with them, showing them physically that you're not going to, be over them and scare them in that way. It's not scary always, but it's overpowering. So can we get down on their level and then just listen? That is really important. And then in a confirmation, then what we're doing is then showing them that now they are entering into the fullness of the sacramental life of the church, and they now get to fight like we all fight. They get to now take communion like we take communion and grow in that, like I'm still growing in that. I haven't figured it out. I know, Father Wade, you haven't figured it out, right?
No.
Bishop Chad always says, if a priest actually says a perfect mass, he'll vanish. He'll just, right, because there's it's impossible. It's an infinite thing. And so for children then, I want them to see that they are joining me in my fight for the faith. They are now being empowered to join the same fight. They're being welcomed into the tradition, and I learn from them as they learn from me. And that's a really important relationship to do. How do you do that? It takes time. I think it takes a lot of high fives and a lot of just cookies. Food's really helpful. But one great story that came to mind was we had this family, the Fickleys, come to church years ago. Thomas Fickley and Natalie, they had one kid. No, I think they had two boys. And they visited, and as they were walking out, the first Sunday, Father Glenn turned to them and said, "What, have those boys been baptized?" They said, "Oh, no, not yet. We don't really know about." He said, "Well, we got to get those boys baptized." And that changed Thomas's view of the church. That one comment, he said, "Whoa, this guy cares about my kids." And now Thomas, who then they joined All Saints, and now he's going off to bless lots of other kids. Now he's starting St. Dunstan's Academy. That's the same family, and they're having their 8th kid. And we've baptized all of them. It's that sort of openness towards kids and that sort of desire to want to bring kids into the life of the church that then can change families.
Yeah. Well, I think that's really, I think, foundational to this whole discussion. Because one of the things, when I was growing up, the attitude was kids are to be seen and not heard. I heard that actually. And then the other thing is, I think a lot of times people think that there's something missing in their lives, so we'll have a kid. And, and so having a child, is something about like replacing or at least having something that is missing in one's life. And yeah, I think, what you just said is so important in terms of, not only, connecting, but valuing, listening. You don't hear that very often, that we need to listen to our kids. And so, yeah. And I did not know that about the Fickleys, by the way. So that's interesting to hear.
Yeah, funny how it's just that one thing. It's an openness to kids through a sacramental life, right?
Mm-hmm.
That then shows a greater openness to supporting the family through through parish life. And I think that's where our tradition just flourishes, right? The connection between the parish and the domestic church can be so strong in the Anglo-Catholic tradition. The whole impetus behind the Book of Common Prayer is how do we bring this rich prayer life of the church into the home for lay people. And that connection then for parents to really think about how to help their children grow in the life of the church, I think it's much easier in our tradition, actually. We have a tradition rich with resources to help their children grow up in the faith and not feel like it's just their parents. So, for example, for families of how to celebrate the calendar, the liturgical calendar in their home, that's an important way then for kids to connect with the parish church. And no longer is it, oh, I go to church on Sunday. No, then they come on Sunday and they tell me about, oh, hey, we did the thing that you were talking about. We had those candles from Candlemas. We actually then went home and we lit them, and they're beautiful. And this year, for the first time, it just turns out that we have candle makers in our parish who are amazing. Blue Ridge Beeswax, go look them up. They're amazing candles. So they led a workshop on the last Saturday, and we made candles for the whole parish, and everyone volunteered, and a lot of families came. And then on Sunday, I did the blessing of the candles, and then we then gave them out to all the families. And now at home, they have the candles that not only they made, but those candles were lit from the Sanctus candle, which was lit from the Easter Vigil candle of the new fire. And now these things start connecting. The life of the parish gets interwoven with the life of the home. And for a kid, this is important because kids know very quickly when things are isolated, when they actually aren't really backed up. So if I go to a kid and I start talking about how I love NFL football, and then the next week he comes and asks me about a game and I don't know about it, he's going to see through my lies that I actually could care less about NFL football, right? I've got to actually back it up. I got to show it. Kids see it really quickly. So they also see their parents, when their parents go to church and then the rest of the week is devoid of church at home. Kids connect that. That then gets, it goes deep into them. And without saying anything, they know, oh, home and church are separate. Church doesn't really matter because it's 1 out of 7. And I know that 6 out of 7 is more than 1. You see how kids can understand that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so how do parents think about, well, then how do we grow the domestic church? In our tradition, it's easy. You don't have to make up things. You don't have to go searching. The Book of Common Prayer will lead you into it. And it's not easy, but it will lead you into it. And as I was thinking about this kind of domestic church thing, Chrysostom, of course, came to my mind because he has all these sermons on family life. And some of them, I'll be honest, are really weird. But he has this one little great passage. And do you mind if I share this?
No, please do.
Okay. So he's talking to parents and he says, don't say the Bible is just for monks. And don't ask, am I turning my child into a monk? No, it's not necessary for him to be a monk. Make him into a Christian. Why are you afraid of something so good? It is necessary for everyone to know scriptural teachings, and this is especially true for children. Not knowing divine truths, they do know something about pagan stories, learning from them about wondrous lives, about heroes in the sight who served the passions and were afraid of death. Such an example is Achilles, inconsolable, dying for his mistress. Another who gives himself over to drunkenness, and on and on and on. Therefore, your children need remedies for these things. And it's interesting, he goes on in this sermon, that the remedies for worldly wisdom or, worldly stories or whatever, right? To me, I always use Hallmark, which is evil. Anyways, The contrast to that is Holy Scripture, but the way that Chrysostom talks about it is not just reading stories and memorizing, even though there's an important place for that. It's imitation. That's what he wants parents to provide for their kids. And imitation starts with, imitation of the saints. So give them the stories of the saints. Imitations of Jesus. So give them the stories of Jesus. And then imitations of parents. So give your kids the person you want them to imitate. And do that with your faith. Kids, this is not just intellectual. This is living. It's moral in the all-encompassing thought of morals. It's how we live our whole life. And yes, we will fail. And yes, you will not do it perfectly. And then you go to your kid and you tell them that. And then you listen to them. And they'll point it out to you when you don't do it too.
Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah. Well, one of the things, and you've already kind of touched on this, but maybe expound on this a little bit, but when we think about the fact that I think one of the issues, especially since the Enlightenment, and especially in the West, is we've had this sacred secular dichotomy, and it kind of goes back to what you were talking about in terms of the 6 days. That's mine. Seventh day, I go to church. It's just kind of what I do. But piggybacking on this kind of domestic church, practically, what are ways that we can help our kids understand that creation itself is sacramental and that all of life is sacramental, and help them in the domestic church, in the home?
Yeah. Well, one is to relax and realize you don't need to do a whole lot of new things.
Yeah.
And you don't need to go on blogs and look up all this new stuff and be overwhelmed by it. You can, and there are a lot of really neat things out there. And Earth and Altar, one of the sites that I run, we have some of that as well.
Mm-hmm.
But parents are, for the most part, pretty strung out right now, and they don't have a lot of space to do that. And sometimes when we start talking about the domestic church, a mom and a dad, they're going to immediately feel, one, maybe shame that they haven't done it yet. Two, a little bit overwhelmed that, like, oh my gosh, this is just another thing I have to do. And then three, they might feel, because of those two things, they might feel, I just can't do it. I'm not a good enough person, Christian, holy enough, whatever, evangelical kind of stuff they grew up in that still latched on into their black parts of their soul. Anyways, so what's happening there then is I would first push parents to realize, first, just step back and think that your home is the domestic church already.
Mm.
Nothing that you're doing is going to make it more. It already is, because you're a Christian. And so your home is a Christian home. You are the king and the queen of that home. You are the priest and the bride of that home, right? So already there's an ontological sense that you don't have to do anything. It is.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that because I want to take some of the expectations and the kind of to-do list off of it, right? And then the second thing is, what do the parents do already for themselves at home? Like reading scripture or prayer. And then, this is sometimes not easy, right? Because you don't want your kids to take over every single inch of space and time and breath of your whole life, but invite your kids into what you do already. So in my family, we don't do evening prayer every night all together as a family. No, it's just crazy some nights, right? But some nights we do a simple evening prayer at the dinner table, right? With everyone. That, especially during like special seasons like Advent, where it's a little bit easier and we have an Advent devotional or something like that. But a lot of times it's, oh man, I got to do my evening prayer. And my sons who are up, I say, hey, I'm going to do evening prayer. Does anyone want to join? You see, it's not like, oh my gosh, I got to make sure everyone's on their kneelers saying evening prayer together. It's, I want to then invite them in, because in my home, I say evening prayer. I'm going to invite my children into that. This is about, it's me first. I got to think about what I need to do, and then I invite them into it. And from there, yeah, you can add in so many things. I would just think the first thing is just put up a church calendar in your kitchen. That's, one of the church calendars, one of the Ordo calendars. We use the ACC one. I don't know if you guys saw that as well.
We do.
It just has all the saints' days, and let the kids look at it. That's the best start, I think. And then talk to other families and priests about what else can we do, if that even feels like you can handle anything. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe that's not the answer you're looking for.
No, it's great. This year we really emphasized doing, it's Epiphany, season of Epiphany. And so we emphasize doing house blessings, the Epiphany house blessings. So we've done 14 so far. And
awesome.
What's great is people then will ask, they'll say, like a family altar or something like that, or should I have an icon, or should I have whatever, sacred art or whatever. But yeah, part of that is exactly what you said. It's also telling people, look, we're not expecting you to do the hours. I mean, some of this you just need to relax. This is not a competition. This is something that you grow in, and you can do it together as a family. And I think that's especially, I'm on the other side of this. Our 4 kids are all pretty much raised now, but Trish and I went through a lot of kind of guilt early on about, we have to do this, we have to do evening prayer, and we have to do the whole thing. And again, that's a good discipline. I'm not knocking that. But part of that, I like what you said about inviting the kids in instead of telling them, if you don't do this, or else, kind of thing. So I think that's helpful. And I think having a family altar and having space in the church that connects to when they go in church on Sunday, it's not like something totally foreign, and icons and those kind of things. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where I think the house blessing provides a really great framework of how to think of the home. If you take a look at a house blessing, right, there's kind of 2 parts. One is an exorcism. So you cast away
Yeah.
any evil spirits or any evil sickness and things like that. But you can't stop there, right? Then you bring in a blessing.
Yeah.
But the blessings are done in a way that set proper intention. This is the difference, right? This is the difference between a unblessed and a blessed home, is that a blessed home now has proper intention. And one of my favorite ones, just because it just like stood out to me when I realized this years ago, is there's this little blessing for porches or like walkways, porticos. And the antiphon that goes with that is, I will now walk on Solomon's porch. It's like, oh, so all it's trying to do is connect that you have a porch. The temple has a porch. So if you're on your porch, now you can make a connection, an intention that you could possibly, maybe not every time, but you could possibly think of your porch as the porch of the temple, as entering into the temple of God. And then the blessing of a bathroom, which sounds just ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
Has the phrase in it, something like, may we use this bathroom for the benefit of our physical health and refreshment, so that we may serve you, right? It's something to that extent.
Yeah.
Meaning that now I'm going to go to the bathroom or I'm going to take a shower with the intent that this is for godly work. It's still the same old work. What has changed? Now the intention has changed.
Yeah.
And so that's a lot of what a domestic church is about, is what is your intention now? Realizing that, wow, I'm the priest of this home. I'm the queen of this home. What do I do? How does it change your intentions for that? Can you bring prayer at the beginning of a meal to now intend this meal to be for your nourishment so that you may care for others?
Yeah.
And you may bless God for his blessing to you, right? It's a lot about the intention and why we're doing something, even though there might not be an icon on every single wall. Now it's more, first what needs to change is the why, your intention. And then the icons then bring that intention back. Crucifix on a wall brings the intention back. A home altar brings the intention back. All the candles bring the intention back to change you. They don't change things on their own. It's not magic. They change you because they remind you of who you are and what you've intended to do.
Good. So when we talk about, the role of forming and helping raise children in the faith, and you and I talked about this before we got on here, and that is, it's not just parents. And so maybe talking about the role of, especially in the baptismal rite, of godparents. What is a godparent? How does that play into this?
Yeah, thank God it's not just all on the parents, right? Yeah, so I think this is really important because you can get easily overwhelmed as a parent, like, oh man, this is just all me. There's that great study that was done maybe through Fuller Seminary, the Sticky Faith books. Have you guys seen those?
Uh,
It was a really large study done for high school kids going into college, and looking at that, rate of around 50% of kids leave the faith, right? Don't go to church during college.
yeah.
There's lots of reasons for that. But they wanted to get at, well, what about the other 50%? Why are they staying in church? And their findings were pretty interesting, I think. Not totally amazing, not unexpected, but what they came to, or is kind of four things. One was that the church partners with families, kind of what we're talking about, right? Like that the church is actually involved in family life, and the family life is involved in the church. But then two, this is the really important one, that if a kid had around 5 adults that they connected with at their church, they were much more likely to stay in church.
Yeah.
The other one was that the faith of the church was all encompassing. It wasn't just kind of one thing. It was a whole life, and not just moral teaching that you can kind of pull on, pull off, something like that. And fourth, that they could ask good questions. They could push back, and they could doubt, and they could get answers. But that's what kind of Sticky Faith kind of came up with. But the one I always go back to is that idea that a kid needs to connect with around 5 other adults in their life in the church. And that, over the other ones even, was the most consistent fact or most significant statistic that showed who would stay in church after high school. Am I putting that correctly? I think I am. Yeah. So it's not just the parents. In fact, the parents have a key role, but it's actually, can the parents get the kid connected with other people at the parish? That's really important. And now we're talking about priests, youth leaders, mentors, just the woman who always makes cookies, and so all the kids like her. Do they talk to her during coffee hour, things like that? That's another important people. And I think, again, our tradition acknowledges this. In the baptism rite, the parents actually do not name the child nor answer any of the questions. Now, we're moderns, and so we want everyone to feel good, and so we allow the parents to say it and to name the child and to say the responses. But it's the godparents in the rubrics who actually say all of it. It's someone outside of the parents, knowing that while the parents are necessary for the physical growth of a child, the mental growth, and spiritual growth, the kid must need other people outside of their parents. They need to see this. They need to test it against other people other than their parents. And so this is where godparents can be a really important role in the church. Often, godparenthood is hard. It's hard to feel connected. I encourage godparents to pray for their godchildren, give them gifts on their baptismal date, and maybe, at Christmas, and then to touch base with them a few times a year to make sure they have a relationship with them. That's the minimal. And if they live near them, then they can do more. But at least touch base with them, pray for them, things like that. If you're a parent of a kid and their godparents are not around, then you really need to find mentors for those kids at the parish. And this is hard, and we're still wrestling with this as a parish. How do we build mentorship programs? How do we make sure that the opportunity is there for kids? This is hard to do, but I think this might be one of the key things that we can start doing to help kids feel more part of the life of the church.
That's good. Yeah. Yeah, I think sometimes people think godparents, it's just somebody up there to kind of be a witness of what's actually taking place. And it's a lot more than that. And
Yeah, it is. It's a sacramental role. that's being involved there. And they are taking a vow along with the parents, right? And the whole parish actually too. But they're taking a vow to be the responsible spiritual parents of the child.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the parent is not actually responsible to have their kid confirmed. The godparent is responsible to have the kid confirmed, which I think is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And I think the other important thing there too is, do you as a parish, like, does the parish make the kids feel like they're needed?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Can a kid come to your church for a couple years and never have the sense that he's needed there? That's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So kids need to serve.
Yeah.
And in serving, they feel, wow, I'm actually respected and I'm needed here, right?
Yeah.
So all of the boys here, almost all of the boys here are servers, and it gets a little bit tense. You know, we have this huge schedule for servers because there's so many fights going on and things, like boys wanted to serve.
Yeah.
And now before Mass, we have like 3 or 4 boys out the sacristy waiting to see if the other boy didn't show up. And if he doesn't show up, they then get to be, serve. That's that sense of, I get to serve and I'm needed here. And then for the girls, now we have a junior flower guild and they're doing, and now 3 of the girls on the junior flower guild are now part of the flower guild as high schoolers, and they arrange the flowers on their own for Sundays at the high altar, right? So it's not like, oh, they just stay in the junior flower. No, it's now they are part of the flower guild, and they're doing it not when they're graduates of college, no, when they're in high school.
Yeah.
Same thing now that we're starting with the altar guild as well, that they feel needed, that their work is actually necessary to the worship of the church.
That's great. Yeah. Well, I want to talk a little bit about other opportunities and other,
there are.
resources, but camp being one of those. And I'm, full disclosure, I'm very partial to camp. I think I told you, I met Trish at a church camp in 1989. And
This is awesome.
Yeah. So 5 years later, we were married. So anyways, want to talk about camp and, what is the importance of camp? Why is St. Bede's different than a lot of church camps or sports camps or band camps or whatever?
Or marry your kid off
Yeah.
to a person camp that you went to.
Yeah, exactly. So if you could just kind of talk about that for a little bit, I think that'll be helpful, and also something I've had people come and talk as their kids are getting older and getting to that age and wanting to know, because they know the stereotypical idea of what camp is, and so what makes St. Bede's different. So
Yeah, no, and this is what I'm excited about, because I've just taken over St. Bede's. Father Matt Harlow has run the APA Youth Summer Camp for a number of years now, and now that we're moving to a new site and we have an opportunity to kind of change it to match the needs that we saw, that both Father Matt and I kind of wanted to address and what we wanted to do. So it was already a really good camp, and now I think it's just going to even be better, which I'm really excited about. First off, I just wanted to kind of say I renamed it St. Bede's because, one, St. Bede's is one of my favorite saints. He's English, right? So we have the Anglican connection there. And also, when St. Bede was a really young boy, he joined a monastery. And he joined at a time when you didn't have to be of the age of reason to take full vows. So he might have taken full vows at a very young age. Maybe even he didn't even really fully know what he was doing. But why that's important is to show that as a young boy, he is committing his life to Jesus through the life of the church. And that's what I want for these kids to see, that being a kid does not mean that you're less than. Being a kid means you are just as smart as adults. You think just as well as adults. You have to learn more. You don't have full knowledge, but you can think and go through things and ask questions just as well as anyone else because you're a full person. I go back to that a lot.
Yeah.
And so what camp does is take kids out of their normal schedule, their normal days, their normal friends, and it offers them an opportunity to see their life, their intentions, their commitments in a new way. And they get to do it with people who are serious about that, who care for them, love them, and have arranged a whole week of special things just for them. So the love that they feel at camp, I hope, is a really special type of love. It's a whole week dedicated to them rather than a whole week dedicated to them sitting at a desk or doing what mom and dad need me to do, which is good, right? They need to learn that. But this flips it on the head and they become the focus. And so every morning we'll wake up around 7 a.m. We have morning prayer at 7:30 and then mass at 7:45. And after mass, we'll have breakfast. And then the older and the younger groups kind of switch. One of them will go to Anglican studies and another goes to like games and things like that. We do that in the morning till lunch. And then in the afternoon, we have group activities. We go swimming. We're going to go hiking. We're going to hopefully do a canoe or rafting trip this year at an off-site place and do these kind of just really relaxed, open activities in the afternoon to have kids explore and learn and play with one another in these really incredible activities. And at 5, we'll kind of bring that back to evening prayer, supper at 6. And then in the evening, then we kind of have fun with all the churchy stuff. And here we have the master of masters, we have a saint. He would roll right now. Father Paul Stern is the master at kids games. He's amazing. And he has developed this wonderful rotation of Bible skits, Anglican icon, all these wonderful things for kids to do to kind of interact with their faith, but do it in a really fun, childlike way. It's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
And then 10 o'clock, Compline, bedtime for the younger ones, 11 o'clock, bedtime for the older group.
Mm-hmm.
We do that, and throughout the week, then we dive deeper and deeper into what is the life of our faith and how they can live it out. And being in a special place with special people and being respected in a special way, kids listen.
Mm-hmm.
Kids listen in a way that they can't listen in other ordinary contexts. And the stuff that they start opening up about, the questions that they ask is absolutely incredible.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would highly encourage families to send their kids to St. Bede's. I've also been able to bring the cost down, which with inflation is not what you hear these days.
Yeah.
I brought the cost down significantly. And we have a camp where we arrange the whole schedule for our group. We don't do anything else with any other group. We do our own things and we plan it all, which means that every bit of the day is intentional and centered around how to grow these kids and how to have fun with them.
Oh, that's great. Stu wants to go.
Well, as I also grew up going to church camp, so that sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I loved church camp.
Well, Stu doesn't know this, but the bishop and I are going to make all postulants and seminarians. You laugh, Stu. We're going to make you guys be counselors at camp because it's ministry to children is that important. And it's so integral to the life of a priest. If a priest doesn't know how to interact with kids, he probably shouldn't be a priest.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point.
Yeah. No, it is. So before we get off here, and I'm not just doing a shameless plug here, but your book and Jackie, what's Jackie's last name again?
Oh, Jackie Jameson.
Yeah, Jackie Jameson. Very talented and very sweet person, member of All Saints. But the first book, A Guide to the Mass, we use for our adult catechesis.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. And so I say that because if adults have questions, obviously that's what your priest is for, but it's also a very good explanation. Like, for instance, what is that light there above the altar, those kind of questions, it's really helpful. The other one I kept thinking of as you were talking is, and I apologize, I don't have it in front of me, but it's the prayer book for children. What's the name of that again?
I think it's called, or is it Anglican Prayers for Children or something like
I
that?
think that's it. Yeah.
I should have had it out. That
Yep,
is
Anglican Prayers for Children.
yeah. So I have a whole stack of those, and we give those out kind of like a Baptist would give a tract. We give those out
Yeah.
because it is very helpful for our families and especially young parents as they want to incorporate prayers in the home, the domestic church, and make that a part of that. So
The church year book is also fantastic.
yes, yeah. And I forget the name of that too. I'm terrible. But yeah, there's
Yeah, that's the church year. We got to republish that recently, which is really, really great resource on explanations of saints' days. Now, that book is for slightly older kids. I would push parents to a different publisher who is doing My Church's Year by Enid Chadwick. For some reason, Roman Catholic Press found that one, and they are republishing that book, which is more drawings, which are really good. And that's called, I think it's called My Church Year.
Well, so that is republished now.
It is, and it's really well done. I'll have to give them credit. It's very well done. And that one is called My Book of the Church's Year. And that one is pictures, and we do this at our house because we saw another family, a Roman Catholic family, have it at their home, and they just put it on the table and they keep it open with clips all year round because it's just cool every month. And then a step up from that is the book we published, which is The Church's Year, which is then really nice pictures, but fewer of those and longer descriptions of a saint and the traditions behind saints' days. And that's a really great way to connect with the liturgical calendar and having that out and reading through the saints.
Oh, that's great. And we can maybe try to put those in into the show notes as resources.
I'll put all those in.
Yeah. No, that's perfect.
Yeah, there's a lot of really great stuff out there for us as Anglo-Catholics, and I keep coming back to this. We have a really wonderful tradition with great resources, and that's why we're trying to do as much as possible. And I also would plug Father Paul Stern's trilogy of children's church mysteries
Yeah.
called the Littlest Acolyte Trilogy. It is, if you want to actually get to know the liturgy and the Mass, that is probably the best book I've ever read on it. And it's done for children, and it is done in a way that's just really funny, and it's all about this one little parish and mysteries that are involved there. So
That sounds, perfect. I want to read that.
And that's called
incredible.
The Littlest Acolyte.
Yep, the Littlest Acolyte Trilogy. It's put out by the Parish Press.
I bought it. I just forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is incredible. I've just bought a number of copies. We're starting up a bookstore here at the church, and that's one of the major ones we're trying to get families to buy. It really is awesome.
Yeah.
So
that's fantastic. Yeah. No, this is great. Anything else, Father, that we did not cover or I failed to ask that you'd like to bring up now?
I would say if you're listening and you're at a parish without many kids, don't give up hope. It's really difficult to get kind of that first family or a couple first families. And then when other families come, then it's like, oh, there's kids here. Okay, right? It is hard. But if you don't have kids in the parish, you should still have a basket in your narthex with books, coloring pages, and crayons for kids who come and visit. You need to show an openness to kids. The baptismal font at the back of our churches, right as you enter, that is for adults as well. But think of it this way. That's the entrance for the kids who are going to come to our church.
Mm-hmm.
If that's open, or you're receiving holy water, what else are you doing to open up your parish for kids? Have those resources for parents. Make parents feel welcome. The parents are the ones who feel the most, the most anxious about their kids in a service.
Mm-hmm.
So tell them it's all right. We don't mind that. They'll get used to it and they'll love it, and they're going to make lots of noise, and that's fine. And so be intentional and have things ready for the kids to come. we have a tradition and a service and a liturgy that kids can love because it's physical, there's action going on, it's more than just intellectual, it's holistic, and that is built for kids and for adults and the kids in us. So be open for that and pray that God will provide more children for our parishes. We need them because they're the next parish.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been a real treat. I thank you so much for taking the time and sharing this with us and giving us some really, I think, is some important things to think about as we think about, it's not just about separation, like you said, of adults over here and, you have your children's programs over here and all that. That's the opposite of what we're talking about. We're talking about coming together as the church and listening, being attentive, engaging, interacting, and growing together. And yeah, that's great. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate that. And I know people are really going to enjoy this, and we will definitely put the resources in the show notes. And we are going to have you back as we seek to explore some other things that might be very foreign to people, like things like the churching of women or, the blessing of throats or some of those kind of things. So it's
I'd love it. It'd be so great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Father Sean. Appreciate it.
Yeah, great episode. We will have all of these links in the show notes, and if you folks have any questions or comments, please email us at podcast@stphillipsblacksburg.org or podcast@anglicanprovince.org, and we will address those questions in a future episode. Thanks so much. Have a great day.